Another thing I was fascinated with this particular piece was the shadow.
Four works, all distinct, yet tied into a Graham whole. I want to start with Embattled Garden, which is the Graham anchor for tonight. How did you choose that work to be the one single Graham sort of nucleus of the program? How did that come about?
Well, a lot of things go into choosing things for a program. One of them is the balance of sort of light and dark works, and we wanted a lighter Graham for this program.
Colorful.
Colorful.
All the color, yes. Yeah.
And Noguchi, our beautiful Noguchi set. But also when Ellen and I were talking about this program, the whole program really is kind of an into the woods theme. They all have sort of natural environments. There's the Embattled Garden, and then there's that Nacho sort of insects in the jungle leaves. And Axe, of course, has its woodland theme, and Echo, the Greek pool on stage. So we found a way to tie it all together.
Very good. So can you bring us into the Graham studio in 1958 when Embattled Garden was being created? Mm-hmm. She had just premiered Clytemnestra just 2 days earlier.
Right.
She was a busy lady.
She was a busy lady. Mm-hmm.
What was the climate and what was it? Tell us a little bit about the atmosphere in the studio.
Well, 1958, Martha Graham would have been 64. This was one of the few ballets she had ever created that she did not star in. It was not revolving around her.
So it wasn't created with her in mind?
No.
No role for her?
No, because she was creating at the same time Clytemnestra, her only full evening work with herself as Clytemnestra. And it was a difficult time for her because it was when she was first having to turn her signature roles over to younger dancers. When Ethel Winter, for example, went into the role of the bride in Appalachian Spring, on opening night, Martha said to her, "Well, I suppose you know this is the worst day of my life." So it was a difficult time for her. And with Embattled Garden, she had 4 trusted dancers. And Martha was a very collaborative choreographer. She did not come in and say, your right foot has to be here, your left elbow has to be here. She didn't have it all designed. It was much more psychological. We say she used to hypnotize us with the world that she was entering into. And then she would ask you to improvise a little and then shape what you were doing. And she kind of turned Embattled Garden over to these 4 dancers and, occasionally would lurk in the back watching them and shaping it a bit. She was determined. She got furious with them in one rehearsal because she said, no, there will be no sentimentality on my stage. And she's told Isamu Noguchi, there was violence in the Garden of Eden. It's only idyllic in retrospect. So she really wanted the primal expression.
Yet there's that one moment of the piété, where it isn't very much. It's just a touch. So you danced Lilith, is that correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little glimpse of being inside that role for us? I can see you in it.
Oh, it's so much fun. There are no nervous. Certain roles in Graham, you have to stand on one leg for about 5 minutes balancing into light. There's none of that for Lilith.
But you have to there's that platform that looks like
there's stuff to deal with, but it's fun dancing. And Martha said that Lilith, there was a great stillness about Lilith. She moves and then she waits. And Martha said,
snake-like, yeah.
She is snake-like. Yeah. And Martha said, she's like a cobra that has lifted, but you're never quite sure when the strike is going to happen. So that's a great image to be directed by, sort of playing with the dynamics of a snake striking.
I love what you said. You made a comparison to Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Can you elaborate on that idea?
Well, 1958, it's suburbia gone wild. Martha also said to us when she was directing us, these are two couples who share a backyard fence and occasionally cocktails. And she says, around cocktail hour, it all begins over and over again. So she was not doing, she was using the Garden of Eden as a metaphor for very contemporary times, suburbia, and it's only 4 years before Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf premiered on Broadway. We're just entering into the Mad Men era and the sexual revolution. So she was,
All that was in the air.
It was all in the air.
Very good. The costumes are, the color, the palette is so, almost garish. It's just so bright.
Very flamenco
Yes, yeah,
inspired. I
right.
think, she commissioned the score from Carlos Suranac, a Spanish composer. And she wanted something very steamy and tropical, I think. Noguchi, for the platforms of the garden, he imagined splitting an apple in two and flopping it over on its side. So those two ovals in the platforms are like the core of the apple.
Can you give us a little background about how Noguchi, when would he be brought in? When did they start talking? And then if you have any hopes of commissioning the next Noguchi.
Martha would not only hypnotize her dancers, but her collaborators as well. So they were very early in the process. She wrote scripts. For example, fortunately, Copeland was on the other side of the country when they were collaborating on Appalachian Spring, and the paper trail is just beautiful and amazing. Letters, and she sent him scripts, and in one of them says, there should be a small fence that means what a fence means in a new country, and something about the shaker, the simple bones of shaker furniture. And you can see where Noguchi was also taking information from these scripts for Appalachian Spring. And then he would bring her a little mock-up, and they were very simpatico. They really both were trying to get down to the essences, the shape that would be the smallest amount possible to evoke a world for the audience members. And Martha said that Noguchi would bring her a mock-up, and if she wasn't crazy about it, she would say, well, Isamu, let me think about it. And he would take it back to his studio and completely change it and bring her something else the next day. So it was a 40-year collaboration. He did over 20 works for her, and there were some arguments, I think, but we kind of think of these sets as so reverentially, but evidently when the Embattled Garden set showed up, it was way too big, and Martha had her stage manager saw part of it off. So. That they were just working artists back in the day. These things had not taken on mythic proportions yet.
So let's move on to Nacho Duato. What is the Graham connection there, and how did you? This is your second work. Last time you were here, you did Rust. He is going through a very different, intense stage. I had just seen an earlier work in Houston, Jardi Tankat, very different, folkish. This is much grittier.
That's one of his very first works.
Right, very early work.
Yeah.
So he's matured, he's changing.
Yeah, he, as a young dancer, studied Graham. He studied at the Graham Studio, and there's actually on YouTube, there is a film of Nacho Duato demonstrating the Martha Graham technique.
Oh, we'll all look for that.
Yeah, you have to go and look for it. So he was very influenced by the idea of the physicality revealing emotion, which sounds simple, but it's really not. I mean, that was Graham's whole thing, her contraction and release, the shape of the bodies actually being recognizable to the audience in a very kinesthetic way. And Nacho is sort of Martha's grandson in that style of finding a physicality that really just reads emotionally.
And so he built this piece on the company?
He did.
What is it like having him create on the company? What does it draw out of your dancers that inspires you?
He's like Martha, he does not come with movement already designed and just teach it to the dancers. And you can see the solos and duets, the strangeness of all these moves were designed on very particular dancers that certain ones have an extraordinary flexibility, others have a certain personal aura. And in the studio, he would really build on each dancer's strengths and personality, I think, really comes through. And he's a doll. He's a doll. And like, I mean, I keep recognizing it in every great choreographer I've ever had the pleasure of being in the same room with. I'm going to write an article, Everything I Know About Martha Graham I Learned from Bob Fosse, because these artists all are about specificity, the attention to detail. And Martha being one of the first choreographers I ever worked with, I didn't have much context for it. You just did what she wanted you to do. But I did have the chance to work with Bob Fosse and realize completely different physical vocabulary, but he was asking for that same attention to detail and the use of image to inform a movement, which is certainly also a hallmark of Nacho and Matzek. It's very detail-oriented.
So what you're saying is that the Graham technique is just an excellent base for going anywhere because of all that shaping and detail.
Yvonne Rainer might not agree with that.
Okay.
But yes, for these choreographers that have an emotional base, a narrative base, certainly Graham is that. I mean, her contraction and release are very emotional movements. The folding of the torso or the expansion of the torso. But as we know from Pilates and yoga, it's also very physically sound method of strengthening the body and informing the limbs. Everything's driven from the spine and the core. So,
well, thinking of the core and the next piece by Mats Ek. So when Mats Ek mentioned an axe, what was your next thought?
You know, I'd been after Mats for a while to please do something for us. And just when I started hounding him, he had decided that he was going to retire and that he had other things that he wanted to do. And so he was reluctant. However, he told me that Martha had been so influential when he was a teenager, I think, in Sweden in the 50s. He saw the Martha Graham Dance Company. And he had been planning to go into theater, but seeing Martha's work sort of sent him into the world of choreography. So he felt like he owed us one. And he called me a year or so later and said he had just finished a dance film. He hadn't created a dance and made a film of it. He had created a film that he had choreographed for. So it had never been on the stage. And he said that if I was interested, that he would make a stage version out of this film that he had created for experienced dancers in their 60s. It was an older couple in this film, so that he would make it for our younger dancers and put it on the stage.
So the young Greek choreographer is new to me, maybe new to many people. Foniadakis, how did you discover him and how did he...
We're one of the first American companies to have commissioned him. Cedar Lake beat us by a couple of months. But we have a lot of supporters in Greece because Martha, of course, borrowed their stories on so many occasions.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have, in recent years, been doing thematic seasons, choosing an idea that sort of informs our programming. One of the first years we did our political dance project that allowed us to use Graham's political works as well as others and commission new works. And a couple of seasons ago we did Myth and Transformation, and talking about how artists take iconic stories and transform them, like Embattled Garden, for example. And our Greek supporters wanted to commission a work for Myth and Transformation and suggested that we look at Andonis Foniadakis' work, which we did. And told Andonis that we wanted him to fit into our myth and transformation theme, so he decided, like Martha Graham, to choose a Greek myth to inspire him.
The shapes, they echo Graham's arcs, but the speed is just relentless. So was that, how did that?
That's his style.
That's his style.
Yeah, if you look at him on YouTube, he's
Okay.
done work for the Geneva Ballet, for example, that it is, in the Cedar Lake, it is that hyper flung speed. But, you know, you really can't move that fast without moving from your core. So it took a while for our dancers to let those limbs fling, but you still have to generate it from the center.
So I'm going to take the last question. You're turning 90. What do you have something special in plan?
We do.
Let's hear about it, because we want to follow you.
Okay. Well, we're at Martha Graham Dance on Instagram. That's the first thing you know if you're going to follow us. But yeah, we are doing our 90th anniversary celebration in April, because April 18th, 1926 was Martha Graham's first concert with a group in New York City. So we're actually going to be performing at City Center on the actual birthday. Our season will do 4 of the greatest Graham classics with Matz's Axe will be on that program, one of our commissions this year, along with a commission for Marie Chouinard and Pontus Lidberg. So it'll be a mix. We're also, this fall for our 90th, we're going to be in Italy, China, Turkey, Germany, and for the first time, Russia, for a 7-week tour. We're partnering with Google on a project that will give you a little tour of our archives.
We need a yearly Google Doodle for Martha Graham.
Yeah, that's right. So we have some other special things coming.
It sounds like a great year. Janet, thank you so much for being here and the company. It's just what a wonderful way to end the season.
Thanks,
Thank you
Nancy.
all.
Thank you.